Hello from Bloomington. I'm Heidi Kessner, Dean of the Kelley School of Business. I want to thank you for participating in this important roundtable discussion. Wherever you are in the world, the pandemic has been and continues to be challenging on many levels. Many are experiencing stress and heartache from losing family and friends. In addition, the pandemic has disrupted our everyday lives and livelihoods on a global scale. And of course, there are ample uncertainties going forward. I think we can all agree we still have very challenging paths to navigate, paths that require short-term and long-term solutions. As we look forward to recovery, it's imperative that we share ideas, insights, and best practices so we can lift each other up and press ahead on solid footing. We'll have to be nimble as well, opening ourselves up to new ideas and visions wherever they may take us. The pandemic has certainly shown us just how interconnected we are. We are truly all in this together, and we will recover together. I urge you to keep the conversation going long after this roundtable program ends. Thank you again for participating, and please stay healthy and safe.
Good afternoon, and welcome to the Indiana University Kelley School of Business's Worldwide Roundtable Discussion. My name is Levon Schlegel, and I'm the Executive Director of the Institute for International Business, or IIB as we are more casually known. Thank you all for joining us as we begin the second of our 5 global panels of our second set of roundtables in our 10th anniversary celebration programming. During these next 2 days, we have distinguished speakers from Sub-Saharan Africa, Mexico and Latin America, the Middle East, North Africa, China, and the US, all gathering to tackle a topic that is on everybody's mind, the economic recovery post-pandemic. Before we get started, you are among the more than 800 registrants to these 5 events. And as you can imagine, it took a global team to put together this session. First of all, I'd like to thank Dean Heidi Kessner for her opening remarks. I would like to thank Jen Goins and Allison DeWitt from the Kelley School of Business Alumni Association, Roy Hooper from the IU Alumni Association, Ali Batten, Director of the IU Global Gateways, Molly Fisher, Director of the IU Mexico Gateway, the Kelley Marketing Team, Zach Watt and Brian Boucher from the Kelley Learning Media Team. And finally, I would like to thank Tim Smith from IIB, without whom this project would not have happened. You will meet Tim at the end of the program as he moderates any questions that you might have during the conversation. Just to note, please use the Q&A function to ask your questions and feel free to do so throughout the event. The last year has been unprecedented in our lifetime. The COVID-19 virus has forced all of us to redefine how we work, how we communicate, and even how we buy groceries. Individually, our worlds have gotten so much smaller, and with that, our purchasing behaviors have changed dramatically. From hoarding essential items to not participating any longer in the local economies of our cities. Our relationship with the global economy has certainly changed regardless of where you are in the world. Unemployment is high, supply chains are challenged, transportation and logistics have to redefine the way they deliver products and services. We've asked our panel to explore what this means. How do we kickstart our local, regional, and world economies to return to some level of normal? And in parallel to regenerating what we had, we need to ask, what did we learn so we're prepared for next time? And most importantly, what are the good ideas that emerged from this massive macro disruption that we need to continue? Not a small topic, but that said, our moderator and panel for the day are more than up for the task. It is my pleasure to introduce today's moderator, Dr. Roberto Salinas Leon. Roberto is president of the Mexico Business Forum, where he works on various projects of policy analysis, media, investment advisory, and economic consultancy. He is also currently the director of the Center for Latin America of the Atlas Network. Dr. Salinas holds a BA in political economy, history, and philosophy from Hillsdale College in Michigan, and an MA and PhD in philosophy from Purdue University here in Indiana. Roberto has been an adjunct professor and visiting professor of political economy at the Escuela Libre de Derecho Universidad Nacional Autónoma de Mexico and the Instituto Tecnológico Autónomo de Mexico in Mexico City. He is senior debate fellow and debate lecturer at the Calvin Coolidge Presidential Foundation in Vermont and an adjunct fellow of the Cato Institute. He has published more than 2,000 editorials, including an occasional columnist in the Wall Street Journal, the Journal of Commerce, Investors Business Daily, and Barron's. Also, Roberto has delivered more than 900 lectures in Mexico, US, and Canada, several countries in Central and South America, and throughout Europe and Asia. He has testified before the US Congress on NAFTA and free trade, structural reform in Mexico, and monetary and exchange rate policy. In 2009, he was named among Mexico's group of 300 leaders by Líderes Mexicanos. Roberto, welcome and thank you for moderating today's distinguished panel.
Dean Schlegel, thank you so much for such a kind and warm introduction. It's a real pleasure to be back, albeit in a virtual fashion, with Indiana University, an institution that has become near and dear to my heart. As you mentioned, given my background, I'm a Hoosier at heart, both academically and every which way. And I think this type of dialogue, this type of civilized conversation is absolutely essential to understand not just what occurred in 2020 with the pandemic, but also the path forward, the way to look forward. And to this end, I want to thank also Timothy Smith, Professor Smith, for inviting me to be part of this opportunity, of this dialogue, moderate this phenomenal panel, and be part of this leadership conversation as to the different points of view that we can gather and we can galvanize in understanding how the post-pandemic recovery is going to look like. Our focus today is Latin America, and we have the formidable opportunity in the context of this Kelley dialogue to have with us a truly stellar panel of participants that will let us know not just in their own home countries, but also how they see the different challenges emerging in the entire region. Maria Elisa Rojas, who is a great leader and philanthropist in Mexico and currently is the executive director of the Mexican Foundation for Education, Technology, and Science, FUNED. We also have Claudia Pires, who is the founder of SUMA, an absolutely amazing exercise in social entrepreneurship and social philanthropy. I welcome you to please Google her and see what her work is all about. And finally, we have Pedro Albarran, who has a long trajectory in Mexico in the auto industry and the tremendous disruption that this industry has seen in the past 25 years as a result of trade integration. And today is the owner and president of TPC Unique Products in Mexico. So all three of them are ideally posed to share with us concepts concerning how innovation applies in our current setting, how entrepreneurship applies, has it been disrupted, and where is it heading, and also the emphasis on human capital. So as part of our first question for our panelists, I would like to begin with the obvious one. The global pandemic, the COVID-19 pandemic, occasioned tremendous disruption and what others have called a climate of radical uncertainty throughout the entire world. What are some of the implications, according to our panelists, according to you, that you are witnessing either in your home countries or as you see it in the region at large? And what do you think the recovery efforts will look like? Many people have talked about using the alphabet style economy, the VV, for instance, a victory over the virus. What will the future look like after VV, or the V-shaped recovery, which has become commonplace? But there's also the K-shaped recovery, those sectors that have really blossomed and have taken a great leap forward, but those that are now victims of these disruptions, and will they be able to survive looking forward? So I'd like to start with you, Claudia, and whether you have any thoughts on the matter.
Hello, good afternoon to everyone. Thanks for having us, and thanks for the introduction. So I'm going to take the bright side, what I've seen back here in Brazil regarding the pandemic. So I will bring three matters that we have seen here. It's the digital transformation. So we saw that Brazil has really making kind of revolutionary, on the digital banking. So the number of unbanking people here back in Brazil has dropped by 73%. So really, the digital banking has growing a lot, and now we kind of have more people coming, from the informality, majorly because of the emergency help that the government has done. But anyways, that helped even them to bring to the economy. So another thing is like the e-commerce. So we see like people really, growing the way that they are buying. We have like 46% of the Brazilians start, shopping online. That was not a habit back here in Brazil. So you see that, the habits are being transformed, but also the retails are transforming with that difference. And also the social entrepreneurship, so I'm the one on this, has been growing a lot. So we haven't seen, a record number of new entrepreneurs. Maybe it's not their genuine advocacy, but they are coming to the market, they are becoming new entrepreneurs, and then it's good for them and for the economy as a whole. And the third one, just for introducing, it's I've seen a lot of, growing discussions on the topic of environmental issues. So, the discussions had been on, but finally, got in a new perspective. So I think those three things were, quite good changes that we've seen in Brazil. I saw in other countries, but those ones to lower the bureaucracy of we have here back, Latin America has been good things for starting the conversation. So I think that's it from now.
Claudia, that's a great point. And of course, the whole idea of simple rules for a complex world, I think, is absolutely essential to consider how a sustainable recovery of our different economies, in view of the enormous bureaucratic largesse that sometimes occasions such a high transaction cost in our daily doings, but also sometimes even to the point of becoming regulatory extortion. We'll get back to that point in a bit because I think it's one of the great policy challenges. But Pedro, in your expertise in looking at different brands and the disruption that all of this has occasioned, how do you see the future of these retail markets, and especially what effects do you see of this disruption and radical uncertainty on supply chains, particularly as relates to Mexico and North America, but also throughout the entire region? You're on mute.
Sorry. Thank you, Roberto. Hi, everybody. Very interesting. I think we were already in the process of a wild change in technologies and elimination of middle channels. And this COVID crisis has definitely increased the speed at which we are changing this in the world. Let me tell you an example. The best example I can provide is from the automotive industry. A few years ago, Tesla launched, and they disrupted the normal way of doing business, especially at the supply chain. They basically eliminated the middleman. Meaning dealers. This was not well perceived. Definitely, many states in the U.S. it was challenged, but during this time, everybody had time to really rethink how to do business, and we are coming back to the business ground in a much changed way. Let me tell you two examples. More brands are starting to eliminate dealerships. meaning the entrepreneur in the middle to sell their vehicles or service their vehicles. They are moving on, or they are already announcing to move on into selling basically directly to consumers, of course, using all the platforms, the web, the internet. But we are also seeing a very big disruption in electric vehicles, for example. It was already a trend, but during this pandemic year, it has exponentially increased the speed at which all automotive players are moving on. We can see that a brand that maybe manufactures 500,000 vehicles now is worth more than a company that manufactures 10 million vehicles like Toyota. This is just amazing, but I think this is a trend that nobody's going to stop. And on the contrary, we have to think inside ourselves and say, I think we have to jump into this change, because this is not only good for the business. This is very good for consumers, but it's especially good for the benefit of the environment of this world. So we have to embrace change, and I have seen no other time with as much change as what has happened in the last year, and this is just only the beginning. This is going to be a radical change for almost every industry, and we will see that in the coming years, no doubt.
Thank you, Pedro, and that's a great point. If this is just the tip of the iceberg of a glacial disintermediation moment that our business world and our economic environments are going to be facing, and you even see it, I think, in the informal economy. It's not just related to big corporations or the formal economy in our countries. It's also related, I think, in every walk of life and in every economic engagement that Latin America citizens undertake. Now, one of these great disruptions, Mariely, I'd like to pass the word on to you, has been education. And you've been a tremendous and recognized leader in the area of human capital formation. One of my favorite initiatives in the entire region is one that Mariely and her foundations came up with, is Ponte la Verde, which is the national teams, the soccer teams, not Ponte la Roja, which would be, of course, Indiana, but Ponte la Verde, and as a source of pride and a source of engagement, especially of our young populations. And yet the disruption in education, it's not just about Zoom fatigue, and it's not just about doing distance learning. There's something fundamentally disruptive, and perhaps negatively so, of the fact that we no longer have that communal engagement that is so necessary for our young leadership to be able to capitalize and to be able to take advantage of as we look forward to the challenges of disintermediation, or the challenges of how post-pandemic recovery is going to look like. Mariely, I'd love to be able for you to share your thoughts on the matter with our audience.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Roberto, and everyone who joined us for this roundtable. In terms of education, I think it's pretty much very similar, as Pedro was saying. No, changes were coming. We knew they were here. And then the pandemic came, and everything just sort of accelerated in a way that nobody really could imagine. We were talking about inverse classrooms, about really learning anywhere. We've been talking a lot about lifelong learning and how we can have this engagement with universities, even though we live in different places. But nothing really has come to play until right now. So definitely the pandemic has become the catalyzer for the acceleration for the fourth industrial revolution. However, I think it's very important to mention that in terms of what is happening economically and in terms of economic depressions, well, depressions are not only economical, they're also psychological. So education-wise, I think specifically in Latin America, we've always had a very big gap between technology and social capital, and how we can narrow this gap and really try to find ways to foster and to enhance social upward mobility in terms of education, in terms of jobs. Right now, with this very big disparity in terms of who has access to this technology and who doesn't, has made this gap even wider. So I think there's a lot of play right now in terms of what we can do. Of course, right now, everything that has developed technologically wise has been remarkable, and I think we should embrace and acknowledge that, but we should always have and bring up to mind what we can do as a whole together, private, public, philanthropic sector, to really try to find ways to narrow this gap and help with the social mobility in terms of education, because there are a lot of inequalities, and there were a lot of inequalities before the pandemic in Latin America and Mexico, and now this has made things even broader.
And as it happens, Marieli, today the IMF announced that while the macroeconomic numbers for recovery look better or less worse, if you will, than originally anticipated, in large part because of the disruptions and the technological disintermediations that Pedro was mentioning, that Claudia was mentioning also. Nevertheless, there's a significant worry that this is also unmasked already remarkable and patent inequalities that existed in our different countries. You touched upon an issue that I think is absolutely fundamental, which is social mobility. And it's not so much about taking the pie from here and giving it to this sector. What we want is for that pie to grow, and that is a very, very difficult exercise looking forward. But what examples or what recommendations could you share with us as far as approaching the issue of making social mobility far more accelerated and far more facile, far easier, so that our different sectors are able to participate in that type of inclusive prosperity that we want in Latin America?
Well, one example that I can think of is this project that you mentioned upon earlier, Ponte la Verde, and how we made a call for the Mexican youth, as you know, well, or if you don't know, let me share with you that every time there's been a natural disaster or a big disaster in Mexico, we are known to be very solidary, to really work together as a group. We've seen it in the last earthquakes that we've had. You know, the earth just stopped shaking and everybody was out, especially young people, millennials were out in the streets and seeing how they can help, give a helping hand, and work together. And with this natural disaster, which is, I think, the biggest natural disaster in our lifetime, and definitely in the millennials' lifetime, as of right now, the instruction was, don't do anything, stay at home. Stay at home, don't go out, don't help. So they didn't really knew how to work or do something. They couldn't go to school. They were staying at home. A lot of things were changing. So we came up with this idea to really give out a shout out, a call to the Mexican youth and tell them, give us some examples of social entrepreneurship projects, because we want them to be long-term. We want them to be sustainable in terms of how we can help reactivate the Mexican economy towards the pandemic, specifically targeting three main objectives: health, food, and education. And it was amazing. We made this call in less than 1 month. We received more than 1,500 projects, very diverse in nature, and they all had they all had something in common, that wanted to really help with this pandemic, and they, almost all of the projects had a technological aspect. That's something very millennial that we saw, but they were trying to find solutions in how we can bring that technology towards the most vulnerable population. And for instance, sometimes technology is not only iPads, iPhones, or whatever. Also, sometimes technology is really just going back to the roots of what local traditions are and giving out the word. For instance, we had a project called Embajadoras Indígenas, Indigenous Ambassadors, where they wanted to translate the COVID-19 prevention and everything that the government was saying. And even though the government had the literal translations, a lot of them didn't take into account their traditions. So what they do is that they went to their local villages, and throughout the radio, which is their primary source of technology, they could really give out the word, taking into account their customs and traditions. So I think right now, in terms of social mobility, is not only going to college, getting a degree, and then finding a good job, is really trying to find ways to work together as a community, uniting the public, the private, the philanthropic sector, and to find ways to really enhance technology to our everyday life, and try to balance out the ways in which we do things, and try to narrow these very big inequalities.
Excellent. Thank you, Marielene. By the way, it's not really a coincidence that I am actually usando una verde myself, but congratulations on that great project. Claudia, I wonder if you see, if you can share something similar of what Marieli has been sharing with us in Brazil and also in the Southern American region. I think Brazil has gotten a bit of a bad rap. The Economist, for instance, last week was saying that its management of the pandemic. On the other hand, you see that economically, they seem to be doing far better or less worse than other countries, certainly Argentina or Peru, for instance, or even Colombia. I'm married to a Colombian, so I know Colombia fairly well. And then we have other examples. Chile, which had the student rebellion in October of 2019, surrounding these inequalities and these perceived injustices. And yet it's been a model of what the vaccine rollout looks like. And then you have Uruguay, which until very recently was also the model to follow. And all of a sudden they have a spike because of the supposed Brazilian cepa, the mutation. And so in the face of these enormous challenges, how is it that Brazil has been able to push forward, capture that path forward?
I think even, to Marieli's point, we have like some ways case regarding that. So I think the voices of the vulnerable just got, higher. So it was a way that, to me, when came the pandemic, for sure the inequalities that was in our face just, gave us tons of claps, say, it's here, we can't, hide anymore. And then, the voices of the ones who need it was raised. So we were listening better then. And then, when the donations came in and came in tons of people helping each other, suddenly, they were realizing that what I want to give to someone is not exactly what they needed. So it's a kind of really getting empathy who those are that are more in need, listen them and get together. So there are different kinds of credits for those people. Seeing, the millennials in a different way. What kind of the next job we need to get technical education for the future of job. And now some new ways that the entrepreneurs seeing, I gotta go to take care of my life, not just, waiting for the government helping me. So let's share, knowledge within us in different ways that we can, grow our voice better. And then, there is a very nice example here that is Gerando Falcões. That is a guy that, has an incredible view of, let's put the favelas, the slums at the library. So you don't want to see that anymore, that should be the past. And he's kind of, to teaching everyone, saying, we have to look to those people in a different way that, from years since our colonization, we have seen them. So it's little by little, but I mean, living here almost my entire life, I see that, I mean, those voices from the youngest, from the vulnerable, has been listening in a different way. So getting them encouraged is a way to show them, I mean, the best ways that they can get in the community, and also getting to the economy, and also the economy can, help them. So the government just, saw people that they could develop, social programs, because I mean, those people were not, economically seen because they were not, registered. So I think in this way, we are gonna get out of this pandemic with a better, knowledge of our inequality, and with better tools that we can, empower them to kind of, help in having a social mobility. So I think there is not a huge transformation up to now, but I think, I mean, we get, solid manners to, get out of the pandemic in a different way from how we entering. So people are looking for their digital skills in a different way, even not having, the best instruments of having it. So like Mariela was saying, I mean, I just don't need just a cell phone or a computer, but I can have like social technology that I can spread within my community to grow better. So hopefully, and I'm kind of very positive that, I mean, we are gonna get in a different way when, everyone is vaccinated, and we can, go to the streets better. And just one last point that I think Mariela and yourself just pointed, we are more aware of the mental health of, the employers, the population. So we are kind of, looks like we are being more empathy with others. So, and that gives me, a lot of, good feelings moving forward.
Well, certainly the importance of technology and the achievements of human progress have come to the fore in 2020. And if anything, we can just say, look, in less than 12 months, we had a vaccine. That's a historical accomplishment that had not ever been seen in the history of the human race, and what it means for the global economy. Had this pandemic hit us in 1995, I don't want to imagine how the disruption would have occurred back then, with very different means of communication and with these intermediations that Pedro was mentioning. We've seen, especially in the most ravaged countries, particularly places like Venezuela, how localities and people with very little means have opted even towards the cryptocurrency market to try and trade and survive. And all of a sudden, there's secondary markets in Cuba and Venezuela and Argentina. Some have emerged in Mexico. And Pedro, as from your perspective, and this great point that you made about the acceleration of disintermediation, what does this mean for financial services on the one hand, and what does this mean for empowering those families that are either part of the dynamic middle class, or unfortunately, because of the economic depression, have once again gotten into either moderate poverty or extreme poverty? Is this a reasonable hope for the future that the advances in fintech and in other financial services can bring us towards the future?
Yes, Roberto, definitely. I think in our Latin American countries, even though we are lagging behind most of all of developed countries, we have seen clearly how technology has come to almost every corner in our countries. Right now, about every person in Mexico has a cell phone. That was 20 years ago impossible to imagine, but now they all do. So what happens in a case of like a pandemic? Of course, there's a lot of misinformation. There's lack of communication, clear communication, especially in Mexico. But all these people who in the past lived in total ignorance, they at least have a cell phone. They are constantly communicating with other persons. They have access to some news, to general information from their community. Uh, this is just great. It's not enough, but it's just great that they don't ignore at all what's going on. So same as you said, what would happen 25 years ago in 1995 with a pandemic like this. I think I'm also very amazed that vaccines are coming, not yet in Mexico very much, but hopefully they are coming by the summer. But again, the big difference is that if this had happened in 1995, I really believe that nobody would really take care. Nobody would be, a lot of people would not care about wearing a face mask, about trying to stay home, about taking certain measures. But fortunately, now that at least everybody has a cell phone, that most people now know how to navigate in the internet, how to access information, this has been better. I'm not saying good, but it's been better. In the case of the fintech, we have also seen a huge development in the fintech about along with the cell phone. Now you can see that almost about a lot of people in the country are using already the bank application, for instance, to do transactions. So this is great because people, for the majority of the operation, they don't have to move anymore. They don't have to spend money in moving to where the bank is. In a rural Mexico, this is not easy, because sometimes when you want to do banking operations, you have to move far away. This is just great. I mean, about everybody now is doing transfers, payments through the cell phone, and this is also a nonstop. You see more and more that the banks, that the financial institutions that are really doing the best job are the ones that have really done big bets on this, and now they are seeing the result of this. Personally speaking, let me just say this: my main business is to sell interiorism to hotels, and also we also have showrooms to sell for the open retail. Honestly, when the pandemic happened, our showrooms were closed. What did you do? I mean, we really thank God that we had a good website where customers could still access, where customers could still see our products, ask about them, quote them, and even make a purchase. I don't know what would have happened without that. I think we have to be very thankful that we can keep our business alive the majority of the times, at least partially, thanks to all this technology. And again, we're just seeing an extreme acceleration of all this, and if we can see that a lot of new companies are evolving, new IPOs, and a lot of that has to be with technology. This is still going to change, and is going to really keep transforming the way we do our lives.
No, indeed. And you mentioned the hotel industry. It's one of those that, at least in Mexico, because of a certain lack of fiscal stimulus, but we won't get into that debate. It was in the downward part of that K letter, right? Of that K recovery, actually suffering a tremendous negative disruption. And where would back this time last year, we didn't think that many of these hotel chains would even survive, and yet here we are once again, despite COVID and despite the fears and despite the pandemic, at occupancy rates. And one has to think of what is it that the hotel industry was able to do, the restaurant industry was able to do, despite the enormous amount of bankruptcies and enormous amount of disruption that took place. How to survive the moment, how to pivot the situation on their front. One economist that I greatly admire, Carmen Reinhart, who is now at the World Bank as chief economist and managing director, She says, this time it really is different. It's an ironic twist on a book that she published with Ken Rogoff. This time is different. Her thesis was, no, it's never different. Every time the financial crisis is caused because of a excess of credit or too much inflation or whatnot. Anyway, she says this time it's really different because the lockdowns occasion what she calls a quiet financial fragility. Do you all see this financial fragility? Because I hear that you're more optimistic about the immediate future, despite the collapse of growth, despite what 2020 signified, almost the reverse of a 2020 vision, right? We all became blind as to what was going to happen in the future. Pedro, for instance, do you see are you more optimistic about the future in view of your enthusiasm concerning technology?
Well, this is going to be a slow recovery for the majority of our LATAM countries. I think we're going to recover more because developed countries recover and they start import or making investments in our countries than what our governments really do to stimulate that growth. I think what we all had to do as entrepreneurs is during this year is to rethink our business, to spend a lot of time in rethinking our business. 1 year ago, I had a lot of projects with hotels, and suddenly all of them were canceled. So it's a good time to really interiorize and think what's going to be your business. Of course, we have done a lot of changes to our business as the majority of our entrepreneurs, and we are betting on a recovery. We're betting in a recovery where we're maybe more lean. We all are struggling a little bit financially, but we do all believe that the worst has passed. And in the way we redesign our business models, I think, yes, we personally speaking, I'm positive that the worst has passed and better times are coming. Of course, we cannot ignore that there will be less competition in many ways. A lot of our competitors disappeared, but the ones that are surviving have also really redeveloped their business models. So it's going to be very interesting. In our personal case, we kept all our employees, we invested in them, and we also took advantage to try to attract very good people for the recovery. It's a very risky bet, but this is because we think it's going to be better after all this COVID crisis. I do think so.
Excellent. Well, thank you. Thank you for sharing that. And Marieli, I wanted to ask you, there's been a great deal of talk about the casualties of these disruptions. And beyond the rhetoric, it is true that many today are unemployed. Many today live day by day, not just in Mexico, but throughout Latin America. Is it time to rethink social policy, which is not just a handout, here you go, but rather rethink it in a targeted fashion and in a way that can mitigate the pain, but empower you with an opportunity for growth towards the future and not just keep you there, as Octavio Paz would say, part of the philanthropic ogre. What is it that private sector and public sector can do to build a 21st century credible social safety net?
Thank you, Roberto. I think you touch upon a very important point right now. When natural disasters occur, obviously philanthropy is one of the sectors where both the private and the public sector try to connect and see how they can give more and more in terms of economic resources as well. So this is definitely the time to rethink policy and to really find ways to teach everyone how to fish, not just hand them out the fish, no? The typical example, which is very typical in terms of what we say, but not really on what happens and what and how we implement it in policy and in a lot of LATAM countries. So definitely this is a time to rethink. This is a time to really go beyond just traditional philanthropy. This is really to think about more towards development and developmental philanthropy. And I think that both if the private and the public sector really take into account that depressions are not only economical, they're also psychological, and try to bring in people in the middle, and really try to bridge those gaps between technology and work, homeschool and social interactions, etc. We can find ways to really foster and enhance how we can do things differently. So this is also the time to be disruptive in the way that we give out philanthropy. And for instance, in the way that we developed the Ponte la Verde program. It was aimed towards social entrepreneurship programs, because we just really when well, getting the donors was easy, in terms of fundraising and having capital. We raised 10 million pesos in 5 days. So that was the easy part. The hard part is always how to hand out this money and make it work. So that's why we came up with the social entrepreneurship project, because we really wanted them to have seed capital to grow, and to grow something that could go on towards the long run. We didn't know how much the pandemic was going to last. We thought that maybe I don't know, a couple of months, and then we were going to be out. I never thought of me having this roundtable discussion via Zoom 1 year later after we gave out these results. So definitely, I think that we need to be disruptive in terms of how we are being philanthropical, and to rethink policy. I think that should be our main goal, to really soften and make the economic development faster.
Thank you, Marieli. And you know, I'll add my 2 cents to this, because I think one of the concepts that has undergone this disruption is the word economics itself. It's not about GDP per capita, as important as it may be, or debt to GDP ratio, or all those different models that, well, I devote a lot of my time to that, and I think it's great, and it can be a very important basis for decision making. But at the end, we cannot forget that economics comes from eco, hogar, home, as ecology too, Claudia, as the environment. So I have to think that there's also an issue of how this disruption has made us rethink economics in terms of being linked to human action, and being linked to all facets of human action, and not just another number. But ecology too, and the environment has to be rethought. There's a disruption there that has opened up a new vista as to how to approach environmental consciousness, and the responsibility that we share as entrepreneurs, as agents in society, as part and parcel of what is the everyday economy, as a colleague of mine, Don Boudreau, would say in the United States. So what can you share? What ideas can you bring to the table in closing? Do you feel optimistic about this environmental consciousness that has emerged, or is this just another example of unfounded hopefulness?
Thanks for asking, because when I was listening to you guys saying regarding, the new policies and also thinking about, the mental health, I was thinking about the environment. So I think has been a new consciousness regarding environment. So people are even, discussing regarding the conscious capitalism, saying, our EBITDA or our P&L is not complete, because we are not seeing at the damage that we are paying, but we're not without paying. We are paying as a community or as humankind. We're not paying as government or industries. So I see, huge discussions on that, the conscious capitalism. I've seen, new funds regarding, ESG. So it's growing a lot. So you see a lot of, at the market, you see new kind of ways to invest, and also the companies that has been more towards socially and environmental consciousness has showing better resilience. through the crisis. So for sure, I'm totally, optimist with that. So I do my job is, changing people's behavior regarding their social and environmental attitudes. And then I see this is really, the tip of iceberg, because I mean, the discussions regarding BlackRock, the biggest $1 trillion fund, saying I'm not going to invest in certain types of companies that they don't do blah, 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 blah. So, I mean, when you listen a guy saying that I'm not putting my money in some kind of industries, because I mean, that's going to be cost more later on. So is looking much more for the long term, not just saying I have to finish my quarter. I have to give my, returns to my donor. So I really see, big changes, and changes coming before were coming from the activists. I've been, talking about the environment my last, 10 years of my career. And I was seeing just activists, talking WWF and Greenpeace. And now, I mean, I'm seeing the financial market talking. So that's a huge change, really. And hopefully, I mean, they're going to raise, the voices and say, if you don't stop doing that, that's going to cost us tons of money. And just to end my talk, I mean, you have seen, the companies here back in Brazil writing letters to the government say, we should stop, the Amazon prices, because otherwise I'm not going to be able to export. So they're seeing their pockets that they're being, it's going to change. So for sure, I mean, that's discussion is just at the beginning. And as population, as human beings, I mean, there's a joke that for the first time you see, the rivers of Venecia clean. So you see, the skies. So people feel it. And I will be very, very sad if, I mean, they don't take in account that thing when the pandemic is over.
Excellent. Well, perhaps another issue that is accelerated here is to transform the debate from crony capitalism in Latin America to conscious capitalism, which is a much more productive debate. And by the way, just as a footnote, this is my opinion, but the great Elinor Ostrom of IU, no less, Vincent and Elinor Ostrom with the Ostrom School of Economic Thought, anticipated these debates in her own thinking and in her own thought. So I think it's great that we can link this dialogue that we're having at the Kelley School of Business Leadership Forum with one of the most remarkable economic thinkers, both she and Vincent, and how they anticipated some of this debates, and in focusing on why context is so important, and not just an isolated formula or not just some universal abstraction, and why we need to look at family, community, and local engagement every single time, whether it's for entrepreneurship or economic activity or the environment. So thank you for that contribution. Actually, thank you all three for this fantastic dialogue. I'd like to turn it over now to Professor Timothy Smith, who I think has helped us to gather a few questions from our audience. Professor Smith.
Thank you so much, Roberto, and thank you all, the panelists, for your thoughtful responses to the questions. Yes, a few questions have come in, and I want to build on much of what has been said, and all of us are so very grateful for what has been shared. This question came in and builds on what you were sharing with us, Claudia, and the others. But turning to trade and manufacturing, with the increasing production costs and shifting geopolitical situation in China, Latin America was at one point, as recently as 10 years ago, projected to be the next emerging manufacturing superpower. However, due to a variety of economic and political factors, this effort was hindered. of course, the pandemic, including the major concern there, that's an understatement. So do you see the advancements in tech, banking, education, and others discussed today, getting the region back on track to achieve? What, if any, barriers still exist? And I'd love to hear each of you share thoughts to that question, very thoughtful question.
Pedro, Claudia, Marieli?
Marieli, any thoughts? And we'd love to hear them. Thank you.
Well, definitely there are some barriers. I think we talked about them a little bit from our different points of view. And well, yeah, I think this is a very big setback for Latin American countries in terms of being this potential economy in terms of trade and manufacturing. But I think if we want to look at on a bright side, we've seen that we are more connected in the world that we even thought of before this pandemic. So as Pedro mentioned before, trying to create enabling environments for foreign investors and alliances are going to be fundamental. I think, well, this is not the forum to talk about politics, but that has also played a very big role in terms of how we are right now and what is there to bring in the future.
Yeah, I think here back in Brazil, I mean, politics is being a true barrier. So that's something that we have to, get over. But a great thing that, I mean, we are bringing much more technology to the agro industry that we ever had, in the, 20, 30 years. So I'm seeing, a lot of technology being applied in the ground to see our fields more productive. And also the new generation are taking over the farms of their parents. So they are the ones that being having the education to see, the field, the land more productive than as we had seen years later. So technology in agro is a big thing that's happening here back in Brazil. And not just, by men, also, I mean, we have a lot of female girls taking over on the agro subject. So that's a great thing to see happening.
Thank you both, Pedro and Roberto. What are some thoughts about, again, the region getting back on track? There was such growth and such potential. How do we capture and capitalize on that and move forward?
Let me speak a minute. I think it's going to be a slow recovery, team. I again do believe it's going to be definitely more because of our neighbors or partners in free trade agreements are recovering than because what our governments are doing. There are things we talk about a little bit manufacturing and technology. I want to say this, that for instance, in the automotive industry, Mexico during decades basically produced vehicles for 5 brands. And they produce mostly low-end vehicles without much technology. But in the last 10 years, that changed a lot. Now Mexico Mexico has manufacturing facilities for a lot of premium vehicles, like one for Cadillac in Silao, León. We have also a BMW factory. We have an Infiniti from Nissan Group factory. That has changed a lot. And the more we have this kind of production which requires much more technological skills and so on, the more technology comes with it. So I do believe that that was a trend that is not going to change. It may have paused, but it's not going to change. I think countries like Mexico and certainly Brazil and other LATAM countries are still going to see this kind of technology investment in manufacturing, and hopefully that will help a lot to keep our economies alive.
Tim, if I may add my 2 cents here. I don't think any discussion concerning global leadership and business can shy away from the policy discussions. And as far as the policy discussions are concerned, the ones that I'm more familiar with do point in the direction that Pedro, actually that all of our panelists were sharing, is coming to terms with how reality looks, because it's not even the new normal. It's just a different reality. It's almost like we went into the twilight zone and now we're in a different world where disintermediation has accelerated. We have the importance of technology. You have a great deal of dislocation. And as far as those policies are concerned, I think that for Latin America, for Mexico in general, what countries are beginning to think about, and they should be thinking about, are what are the conditions that are going to enable me to spur a much greater inclusive prosperity, not prosperity for one sector or for this other sector, or not that type of crony favoritism that characterized Latin politics before, but business in the global marketplace. You see it in Colombia, you certainly see it in Mexico. The enormous diversification that it has had, the fact that it became the #1 partner of the United States, the #1 trading partner, more than China and more than Canada in 2019, already speaks about the fact that integration, and that, as we say in Latin America, hablando se entiende la gente. If we learn to trade and to understand each other, we're going to be able to get ahead. And there are many examples that we can give to this end, but many examples that point to a cautiously optimistic future for the post-pandemic recovery. As Pedro has said many times, there are no magic wands. As Claudia and Marieli have also reminded us, there's also a great deal of hard work that needs to be done from the social entrepreneurship point of view. But those opportunities point to whether the recovery is in 2023 or whenever it is that we get to where we were before, or 2022 or thereafter. Regardless of what that date is, we have to look to what the conditions are going to be then in order to be able for us to capture the opportunities and develop the businesses that have come our way and that we have learned that can happen in view of this tremendous process of disintermediation.
Roberto, thank you. I appreciate that so much. An excellent aspirational question came in to build on exactly what you're sharing with us. And it asks, what new patterns for international business will a global recovery reveal for Latin America? And I like that, right? Very aspirational, very thoughtful, but also let's go ahead and assume the conditions improve and that the conditions improve for all. Claudia, what are your thoughts about what new patterns will reveal themselves, or what new patterns are already revealing themselves from your perspective?
I think, we are being kind of like really invited to innovate. We realized that the way that we were doing things didn't brought us to the best place ever. So I think it's the first time, entrepreneurs, companies, a little, slow, the government is seeing that, to me, we have to innovate in things that, to me, our laws are very old, came from when, we are from the military times, dictator. So innovation, I think, is being, the word of, invitation for all of us to do differently. Do we exactly know how that's going to happen? No, I think we have no clue. But at least I see that the exchanges from, entrepreneurs within, big companies, calling them to innovate in a smaller way and then going to scale, it's growing a lot. So, I have to learn from the ones that are able to fail to go forward. So that is also something that I see, growing not just in Brazil, but also in many different countries. So, that's why startups are, getting all over the world and people are trying to exchange with them. Because I mean, we are more willingness to try it, even though we don't know the right path. But I mean, if you don't go to the ground and test it and do it and try it, we're never gonna know the right answer.
Thank you, Claudia, very much. Very thoughtful words. Who else would like to share?
I'll share. I see a role for women a lot more. I think the demographics, the young women, and one of the great policy challenges is how to integrate those local communities that have been left out throughout our Latin countries out of the global supply chain. How to integrate them, how to absorb them into that logistic, absorb them into that opportunity. Despite whatever personal criticisms I may have of USMCA, and we can talk about that some other time, there's a great chapter there that was included on competitiveness and small and medium-sized concerns. And that was the thought in mind was, for instance, young women artisans in Chiapas, in Oaxaca, in Guerrero. How can I get them involved? Or agriculture as well. How can we get local agricultural ventures integrated into that regional economy, which is almost like a global economy, because the North American economy is so vast and so important to the global marketplace. I think those trends, the role of women, the role of small and medium-sized concerns. And I think from a policy standpoint, we're going to start hearing a lot more. I'd love to hear Pedro's opinions about this. Smart cities and free zones, with that emphasis in technology, in the cost of disintermediation. There's this trend that I think is also accelerated, and I think we're going to see in the post-pandemic recovery.
Yes, no doubt, Roberto. I think there's not much left to say, but as I said, the best example for me is the automotive industry at the retail level, where it will start to disappear the middle channel step by step. But this is only one example, as in many industries is happening. I think companies like Amazon have also landed in many of our countries in a very amazing way. And now, during this pandemic that you didn't want to go out, we all became big fans of Amazon. You didn't used to use Amazon as much in Mexico, but they really developed the business here in Mexico, and you could find almost everything like in other countries. So what does this mean? I mean, it means more direct sales. We're going directly to the eliminating a lot of retail, a lot of brick and mortar. And of course, the race now is who will provide the best technology to do that. It's not only how you buy it, it's all the resources that you have to do the best purchase. And this is happening very strongly in Latin America, as in many other countries. And the thing here is, now that we'll be out from the pandemic, maybe later this year, do we stop using Amazon? No, we became used to. So I think this is to stay. And as our entrepreneurs, we have no choice. Personally, we have 2 showrooms. They are still working, but we have to pair that with a lot of technology to keep the channel in the internet open, as the services and all that goes along with it.
Thank you, Pedro, very much. And thank you, each of you, for your contributions today as we end as we approach the time of the end of our discussion. Thank you so much for sharing your excellent thinking and thoughts, your experiences and your aspirations and hopes. It has been a wonderful learning opportunity for me, and I know for our guests who've joined us. Also, I want to say that this is a conversation we need to continue. I like so much that each of you brought up the fact that we need to bring people along with us, right? And that this recovery needs to be for all. And I hope the learnings will be applied and that women entrepreneurs will outpace the men by a great number. And then we can learn from you, and then we can also learn ourselves and apply that as we move forward in this new normal. And maybe the new normal will look even better, right? I hope so for Latin America. I hope so for the world's economy, because the economy is not just about money, right? It's more about people. And I believe that. So Roberto, Pedro, Marieli, Claudia, muchas gracias, obrigado. Thank you so much for your time and your thoughts shared today. And with that, I want to say, Brian, will you sign us off? Thanks to those of you who joined us, and wish you an excellent day, and stay safe and be well.
Thank you, Tim. Muchas gracias.
Muchas
De nada, es un
gracias.
placer, amigos.
Thanks a
Gracias.
lot.
Gracias, Tim.
Thanks a
Thank
lot.
you.